Hi, good afternoon, Ian. Welcome to Downtown in Business, the Brummy Den. Fantastic to catch up with you as a member of Downtown in Business, and just really, actually, a bit of a drinking buddy. But let's step aside from that. Let's keep it sort of professional for this bit, and we'll talk about what we're doing, what's going on, and things like that. Going to invite you to introduce yourself. So just a little minute or two about you, the company, and then the next thing I'm going to come on to is a little bit of history that takes us to here, and then we'll go from there. So welcome, Ian. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. A little bit about myself. Sorry about this. This is my first faux pas. A little bit about myself. I run Growhouse. I've been coaching for the last 10 years. And for me, what I get out of the work we do is just the pleasure in walking alongside people as they grow and develop their businesses and as they grow and develop as people.
Okay. So where did the name Growhouse come from? Is that the mindset of watching people grow and everything else like that, or am I just thinking of branding?
That's exactly it. It's the idea of this is a place where we help people to grow as individuals and as businesses.
So tell me about the business. How long have you been in business?
Growhouse has been going about 3.5 years.
Okay.
So it was a business that formed when my business partner Robert and I had a chat and said we ought to do something together. So we bumped into each other on a number of occasions on projects, and found that we had a very similar viewpoint about training and coaching, that it needed to deliver real business results. Robert's background had been in growing businesses, and he'd seen businesses gain investment and then almost breathe a sigh of relief. We've got the money, we're there. And his response to them was to say, well, hang on a minute, this is where the hard work starts. And he'd seen too many companies offer training which ticked boxes, but didn't deliver the results. And my interest has always been in doing stuff that starts with what the business needs. So if somebody comes to us and starts talking about training, the first question is, well, what is it that you want to change in the business? What do you want to achieve in the business that's led to you asking this question? Because then let's then build the training to deliver that result, rather than just give you something that we've done before.
I mean, that's fascinating to understand that it's bespoke training, because one package doesn't fit all and that sort of thing. I mean, it's all about your entrepreneurial journey, isn't it? So where you started. So what is your background prior to being a consultant?
So I spent 18 years as a minister of the church. I was ordained when I was 21, so a really young starter in that. And during that time, I got interested in nurturing the next generation of leaders, and that led on to then having a part-time position as head of pastoral studies in a college, and speaking at conferences in Europe and Africa. And then after 18 years, needed a career change. So coaching and leadership development were just a natural progression for me, it's really interesting. When I first started a business, somebody in my family said to me, people like us don't own businesses. And I was in the middle of getting some qualifications as a coach when I got faced with this, people like us don't do this sort of thing. And I remember this hit me one day. I was on a training course, and this thought that people like us don't own businesses really overwhelmed. So I went home that night, went online and spent about 50 quid setting up a company, which then sat dormant for 6 months. But now nobody could ever say to me, people like me don't own businesses, because I had one. So I set up my first business. That was 10 years ago. That business, we actually did the biggest leadership development program in Derbyshire under the old government-funded leadership development fund. That was with a tech company. We took 10 people and help them step up into leadership. During the training, they formed 3 teams, each pitched a project to improve the business to the CEO. And 6 months after we left the business, speaking to the CEO, all 3 projects were still ongoing. So that was just brilliant result.
Brilliant. I think for me, what I understand or what I recognise, probably from my journey as well, is somebody said, oh, you can't do that. People like you don't do that. So you either sit there and go, okay, or you go, actually, we can. So you've taken a challenge there and you've led there. So being a minister, what have you taken? What learnings can you bring from being a minister into the entrepreneurial and the business ownership sort of world?
So this is where my partnership with Robert's really important. So for me personally, this is where I always focus on developing the individuals and the teams. So my personal role is not to give advice on how you should do things. It's to get alongside you, help develop your teams, help develop you as a person. I'm not there to be the expert. I'm there to get the best out of you and your teams. So for me, my focus is very much on the people side of stuff. We then have Robert, who has built and run a number of successful businesses. And we have other associates, some of whom are downtown members who we can pull in to give that specific advice when it's identified that that's what's needed.
So has Downtown in Business been good for you over the few years that you've been a member?
Yeah, it's been really good. We've built some good connections. It's been really good in building our profile in Birmingham. And I think part of where we got to in the stuff we've done during lockdown has been because we looked and said, well, Growhouse seems to have a good reputation. We as individuals seem to have a good reputation, but maybe we need to be a bit sharper on the message and why we're different to other companies that do similar things. So Downtown's been really good for us in that sense. So
fantastic. Thanks very much for the plug of Downtown in Business. Hopefully Abby and myself have served you well. So Wayfinder, talk to me about Wayfinder. What is it? It's a mindset and it's a way of communicating.
So it's a set of principles. So at the beginning of lockdown, I set myself the challenge of looking at how we communicate what we do. So I contacted a number of clients who we've worked with over a period of time, and I said to them, what is it you value about working with us, and forget all our blurb, how would you describe what we do? And I had a number of conversations around that with clients and realized that what people were getting out of it was this sense of us accompanying them on a journey, asking them challenging questions, pointing out things they hadn't perhaps noticed that changed the way they were thinking. And so I then came up with this word, wayfinders, or wayfinding, only to discover it was already existed as part of the design of public spaces. And there are principles in the design of public space that really fit well into thinking about how we navigate our journeys. So the 7 principles are, first of all, define your destination, understand where you want to get to. And the clearer you can get that, obviously, and the clearer you can understand why you want to get there, the better. Next thing is then understand where you are in relationship to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Get a really clear and honest view of where you are now. And then once you've done that, you should be able to see that there are some key identifiable waypoints, landmarks, if you like. So what are they? And how can you use them to measure your progress towards your destination? Then you'll be able to look and say, well, there are certain points along this journey I'm going to have to make some decisions. So what are those decisions? And what will inform the way you make those decisions? Look at that, then you can start saying, okay, well, there are multiple possible paths to get from here to there. So what are the options? What are the possible paths we can take? And then once you've got that, you can then focus onto the immediate future, what's immediately in front of you, what are the things that need to be done right now, and finally choose your path and set off and get going.
How long would this last? So if I bring you into a company, typically how long would this last? How many people would it work for? And
so it can,
what do you think the outcomes would be?
There's almost a how long is a piece of string question. So it's really going to depend on you. It could be just working with the business owner to get really clear, and that can be, it's not usually less than 6 sessions, so 3 to 6 months, but it can be a lot more, and it can become a much sort of longer lasting journey. So CEO of one company I've been working with now for 3 years, and it's not every month anymore, but we now regularly have a conversation and just check in and do that. And if we're working with teams, then again, what are you trying to achieve? So we're not going to spin it out longer than it needs to be, but we want to make sure we deliver whatever it is the business needs to achieve. Okay.
Any major successes coming out of this yet? Any testimonials, claims to fame?
So from wayfinding itself, no, because that's something we've defined during lockdown.
Yeah. Okay.
We designed a leadership program which we're hoping to run. It's probably realistically going to be next spring, and I've already got a couple of people who've looked at the outline of that and said they want to be on that, which is nice to have as a start. Yeah. And that's going to be a program on leadership, but using those 7 principles as a framework.
I think that your reputation around the city is pretty good. It speaks volumes for you and things like that. I am interested in the types of companies. What's your sweet spot of companies that you'd like to work with there?
So ideally, it's probably companies that are 10 plus employees. So below that, it does tend to be working directly with the business owner. Once you get above 10 plus employees, what tends to happen then is you've built a really good business culture, the team functions, but it's all sort of happened naturally for you.
Yeah.
And then you get to that point where the team grows to the point where that starts to stretch and break. And now you have to, if you haven't already been doing stuff deliberately, you now need to do stuff deliberately to maintain the culture of the business. And then from there, up to probably about 200 employees, 150, 200 employees, because at that point then they start getting internal HR function, and we can work there. We've had conversations right up to corporate level, but we think our sweet spot is before companies get to having internal HR.
That's really interesting. So it's 10 to 250. So it's genuinely the SME sort of market. So what in your opinion makes a good place to work? You know, how do people interact? How do I walk out of a place and go, that's a good place to work? That's far better than the last 2 or 3 companies I've worked at. How do you create a good working culture?
I think there's a number of things. First of all, people need to know why the business does what it does. So I know that's a really trendy thing to say right now about purpose in business, but I think it's trendy for a reason. I think we've realised that if you want an engaged team where people come to work and enjoy being at work, they need to feel like they're doing something for a reason and not just to fill their bank account and enable them to live outside of work. There's that thing, isn't there, work-life balance, which is always a weird thing. We know what it means, but actually we spend so much of our life in work, then surely we need to be living that life. So people need to know what they're contributing towards. They need to know how their specific role fits into the jigsaw. Because quite often what happens is people get so tunnel visioned on what they do every day, they lose track of how that contributes to the whole picture. they need to feel connected to people. So we know that a great place to work is a place where people are friends.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to do what they do best every day. So another frustration people get is they have specific skills, specific interests. They get a job because they think it's one that's going to enable them to do those things. And then they find most days they never get anywhere near it. And it just becomes really frustrating because they feel like even if they're doing a good job, they're not doing their best job because their best is something they don't get an opportunity to do.
Okay.
And then I think they need leaders who create the kind of culture in which other people thrive. So leaders who are focused on other people being brilliant. There's a great quote from Alan Keith: leadership is ultimately about creating a way for people to contribute to making something extraordinary happen. Which I think that's it. It's about enabling other people to contribute to extraordinary things.
I think there was another quote, and I forget who it was. They go the people I must follow because I'm their leader. It's the same sort of mindset, isn't it? Probably better coming from you than me on that one. Far more elegant. So we've just gone through unprecedented times, the pandemic. How's that affected your company? What have you done? What have you changed? And I know that you created Wayfinder, but what else has happened in the world according to Growhouse?
So creating Wayfinder was really important for us because it's really crystallized some stuff for us going forward in terms of what we do, what we're really good at, and how we define ourselves. We've also got this focus now on the three areas we work. We grow individuals, we grow teams, we grow businesses. We've launched a podcast this week called Wayfinders.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And in that,
where would I find a podcast?
So that's on our website, growhouse-gb.com.
Okay.
And it's currently going through that process of being syndicated out to all the different places. And the idea is just to interview people on how they navigate life and business. So how they get from where they were to where they want to be. And to try and draw lessons out of that we can all learn from as we hear people's stories. And then in September, we've started getting together a small group to meet for lunch in Birmingham. Which is really we're just going to sit around the table and ask ourselves, what's happening in our business? What we're seeing in our clients' businesses? And really, it's just about understand. If we can quickly understand what the new normal is by getting other people's perspectives, then we can adapt quicker. We're going to do that just for the cost of the lunch. 6 people around a table. That table's already over half full, which is brilliant.
I was going to say you can add me to that if I can squeeze you.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting for me is just so you've adapted your business. So the business, you've gone into COVID, you've gone into lockdown, you've not sat on your laurels, you're successful at what you've done, you've actually reinvented yourself, created new products, you've gone out there, launched yourself. The podcasts I like. Who's going to be involved in the podcast? Is it guest speakers or is it just you and Rob?
So I'll be doing the interviewing, and then we'll have lots of different guests, hopefully. So our first guest, I went to one of our top clients, so Andrew Kerwin, who is CEO of Excel Vets UK Limited. They manage a community of independent veterinary practices. So I've taught the first episode, we talked to Andrew about the journey the independent veterinary sector's been on and some of the things he's noticed and learned on that journey. And the idea will be to talk to a whole variety of people so that people can hear how others are thinking and navigating through life and business and draw lessons from that.
Excellent. And it's going to be kept for prosperity and that, and it's unavailable on your website. Okay, so what's the future? where are you going to take this business? Where would you like to take it? You know, and it's always a difficult question. It's a standard question. You're being interviewed, so we'll decide whether you're going to take the position as CEO of Growhouse at the end of this session. At the minute, you're looking particularly good. Where are you going to see yourself in the future, Ian? What's the plans?
So we've already started building towards that. So we've now got a group of associates around us. Some of those people are people who can do more of what I do. But we've also then got specialists who can bring in advice on finance, on marketing, on stuff like that. And the idea would be to grow to the point where some of those associates are beginning to be brought in-house.
Okay.
And to end up with a team of people who are delivering those services, not just under Growhouse's name as they are now, but as employees of Growhouse. At my age, I've probably got 15, 20 years before I decide to live the life of leisure. And at some point in that time, I'd like to get to a point where I at least have a business that has value to other people to carry on beyond me. So whether or not that's a sale, for me, it's almost more important that it carries on.
It's almost a chairman's role for you, isn't it? It's your baby. You've got to make sure it goes right. I think Growhouse, is it a franchisable model, do you think? Are people interested around the world the way we do business in Birmingham, in the Midlands, in the UK, do you think?
It is potentially a franchisable model, yes. Yeah. If we can really get the Wayfinding brand established as the way we work, and really begin to get known as something, as a company that does something different in the sector, then yeah, I think we've got a chance of franchising.
I mean, if you look at the different cultures, Chinese culture, Indian culture and things like that, when I went to India to work in India for the brief time, it was that they stopped for afternoon tea and things like that because that's actually what they thought we did. And I'm like, no, kind of thing. So it's the, well, what do you do? You know, well, we do the same as you. We turn up at 9 o'clock, we do this, and we go home at 5 o'clock. And okay, that's interesting. So I think the understanding of how we do things, why we do things, and stuff like that, and the way that you do stuff, it's quite interesting. Let's go in there. What about the pandemic and things like that? What have you learned? What have you learned from around that you think you're going to take to your clients? And the behaviour of people, the behaviour of your clients and stuff like that. What can you take from those 2 points?
So I think going forward, one thing I think's become really clear is that flexibility is going to be the word.
Brilliant.
So I went through a patch where I was reading lots of stuff about people predicting what the new normal is going to be. And what I learned was basically if you're trying to sell something, you're predicting that that's going to be the new normal. And actually, we just don't know what the new normal is going to be. But what is becoming clear is that there are some people who are just itching to get back to the office and do things as they used to do stuff. And they're probably terrified by the idea of everything becoming home working. I know for myself, this whole thing has underlined how much of a people person I am, because Zoom and stuff like that is brilliant, but I've just missed being with people. And there'll be lots of people who are just desperate to get back. But at the other end of the scale, there are going to be people who, for health reasons, can't come back. And that, if it's the middle of next year before they start rolling out a vaccine, that's a long time. And if you think that there's going to be people across the entire spectrum between those desperate to go back and those who can't for health reasons, then suddenly this isn't about just managing a remote team or just managing a team that's in the office or insisting on one or the other to different people. It's going to have to be a really flexible, people-centered approach to managing your teams in a way that works for the business, but which really cares for the people. And so flexibility and the ability to adapt is going to be key, I think, going forward.
So we've gone through stages of where we needed everybody to be in a room, you know, as a manager, look at them, manage them and make sure they were there, you know, sort of thing, working every minute of the day to kind of give them the opportunity working at home. And actually it kind of works quite well.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. There's a trust there, there's a professional, there's a few businesses that are thriving and there's a few people that are thriving. And I think that's quite interesting. I think the mindset towards how we do things is going to change completely. You don't need a big office. You don't need to be around. I bumped into some people and we went to St Paul's yesterday, St Paul's Hotel. We ended up having a drink, having a catch up and things like that. And it was interesting just to see everybody's mindset of, wow, isn't it good to see you? We've missed you. We haven't seen you. And I think there was 2 or 3 opportunities that were teased out. You know, that kind of thing. And you look around St Paul's and there's 4 or 5 people sitting there on the laptops. And 2 of those had got office space on St Paul's that they'd given up, which I thought was quite interesting. Yeah. So this bit about the cohabiting space, we've gone from a fixed office to cohabiting space to actually sort of working with a laptop in a facility like that that's acceptable. Yeah. So how are you going to adapt what you're doing to, you know, your coaching and mentoring when people aren't with you? You know, you're going to be able to do this on Zoom and how does that work?
Yeah, so the coaching side is really easy. We did a lot of that on Zoom even before the pandemic. So as much as I personally prefer being face-to-face with somebody in a space, it can be done online. That's not a problem. The training side is much more interesting, and we're playing with all sorts of ideas about how to make online training more engaging and participative. So my observation, I've done a number of webinars over the pandemic for clients, and they're great, they're useful, but you'll know yourself, the level of interaction is quite low because of the technology. And also as a speaker on them, you're not seeing everyone's faces. So you're responding, there's nothing to respond to. And for me, the whole joy and pleasure of training, so I'm really conversational in the way I do training. I don't stand at the front and spout my expertise. I sort of go, here's something interesting, let's talk about it, and let's see if it will make a difference. And that's really difficult to do in a webinar. So we've got some ideas about how to use the technology in a way which would put some of that back in. One thing I know about myself is I need to be on my feet. So we're looking at how do we use the technology so that I get on my feet, and the energy is different that way as well. And we've had some interesting conversations with one client about how we might use technology to do a hybrid event. So some people in a room socially distanced and others joining in online. So that's the interesting one. I think it's challenging. I think I'm really looking forward to the point where we can get people back in the room again. And I mentioned the leadership program next spring. The hope is we're going to take some people up to the lakes, have 5 days training in the lakes, including 1 day up on the fells, being taught how to navigate by some experts. And to get back to the days when we can do that would be good.
I think we've had enough of the Zoom bits. We've had enough of that. I think we need to sit in a room and sit in.
There's a really interesting thing about fatigue, the way people are getting emotionally fatigued because of Zoom meetings, because Zoom's really good for that, get the business done. Yeah. But it doesn't give you that same sense of personal connection, and people are missing out on all those little conversations you have before a meeting, after a meeting, during a meeting.
Or be it around a coffee machine or walking up the corridor and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. I think
And
that's
even
where the bonding builds. Yeah.
Yeah, there was even, I think it was in Forbes or one of those magazines yesterday, there was even an article by the chair of what used to be RBS, saying that he thought that how did he describe it? I think he used something like relational capital that he has with his board will decline over time if they're not able to be in the same room.
Yeah, really. Okay. Well, that's a catchphrase we'll have to remember. Right, so I'm mindful of our time here. Just what's your last 3 gems of advice? So unpaid gems of advice from Growhouse from Ian, just about what we should be looking at, what we need to be doing over the next 6 months in our business.
Okay. So first of all, be flexible, be kind to the people.
Brilliant.
That's the first one. I think the second one was one which probably was behind everything we've done during the pandemic, which was it's a model I share with people quite on a regular basis, and it's the circles of influence. So in the center, you've got the stuff you can change. Outside of that, you've got the stuff you can't change, but you can influence. And outside of that, you've got the stuff you can neither change nor influence. So the advice is don't focus on the outer circle. Focus on the stuff you can change and the stuff you can influence, because that's where the energy is well spent. And the third, keep communicating. Communication is key to everything. You can get everything right, and if you're not communicating, it all falls apart.
Brilliant. Ian, Growhouse, always a pleasure to sit and talk to you. It's surprising that we're sitting on a Zoom call. Hopefully I'm going to be sitting with you face to face in a public place, enjoying your company as normal. Thanks very much for your years of support of Abby, me, and definitely for Downtown in Business. It's been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.